between the two teams. We are live streaming right now, so we've got that taken care of. Fantastic. So we've gone through the introductions for people who are watching this at home. We've gone through and made sure that there weren't any conflicts between individuals and the scorers and myself. Everything has passed through quite well, so we're ready to proceed. We've asked if the parties were ready to proceed. Wheatgrass said they're ready. St. Augustine's asking about the stipulations. So I guess, Mr. Nauman, what stipulations, I guess, would you like to have on the record?
Just that every signature in this trial is a valid signature. That's the only stipulated fact that we would ask.
All right, thank you, Ms. Helpig. Is that correct then for your team as well?
Yes, Your Honor, it is.
Thank you very much. So I'll note that then as a stipulation that all signatures are valid on all of the paperwork that's in this case study. All right, Mr. Nauman, then, is your team ready to proceed as well?
One more, Your Honor. The defense would like to make sure that you, the jury, witnesses, and opposing counsel would be allowed to look at their unaltered exhibit notebooks when entering exhibits in order to speed up the flow of the trial and to avoid any technical difficulties that may come along with screen sharing.
Yes, so we'll go ahead and allow parties to be able to look at those exhibits as we're going through. You still need to enter those pursuant to the rules and make sure they meet the foundation requirements as well. But certainly, there's no way to hand these to each other. So I appreciate that, Mr. Nauman. We're going to let people refer then to their paperwork and other things that they have in this case, rather than asking to publish as we go through. It's a little bit strange. Normally, in the other cases, you would walk up with all this information for us and it'd be all done in 10 minutes. And the videos always just make all these things go so much longer. All right, so we've got the two issues. Mr. Nauman, any other issues then?
None, Your Honor.
Are you ready to proceed then for your team?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so just going through my list, they give me a predetermined list to go through, but we've got our rosters handwritten down for everybody. I'll ask the scores. Gentlemen, did you have enough time to be able to get all the information down that you needed, or do you have any questions for any of the participants before we proceed? Nothing for Mr. Hogg, Mr. Salas, Mr. Descent. Great. Just want to make sure I'm not leaving anybody in the lurch. Normally, we're telling people you can't videotape this. Here we are on video being broadcast live on YouTube for the world to see. So I'll skip down to number 6. I'll remind the team that no recesses are allowed, with the exception of those granted for health emergencies. If there's an emergency, please let us know as soon as possible. And then we've already gone through to make sure there's no biases, either for the scorers to the teams or from the teams to the biases. I will skip number 7, but make sure that you raise any objection you need to contemporaneously if there's an issue that comes up. We need to remind the teams and coaches that any disputes arising out of the competition must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. There are pre-bar and after-bar complaints. All that paperwork has been on the website for people to get filled out and get handed in. I'll remind teams that compliance with time requirements will be considered in the scoring for individual performances. We don't have anybody available in a jury box. I can skip number 10. We've already had parties introduce each other to speed that process up. So I'm going to swear in then the team members, the scoring panelists, and also the witnesses. So normally I'd have everybody stand. You may remain seating. I'll go ahead and have then, let's go ahead and have then the team members turn your videos on, please, if you would. All right, then to the team members, please raise your right hands. And you can simply affirm by putting thumbs up. We don't have to worry about everybody verbally saying yes. Team members, do you promise that the presentation you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform with the facts and the rules of the mock trial competition? Please give me thumbs up. All right, we've got everybody sworn in. To the witnesses then, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witnesses' statements, that you will not add any material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Getting a thumbs up. Thank you very much, witnesses. To the scoring panelists, my two then. Scoring panelists, raise your right hands. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and as objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition? Thumbs up from all the scores. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that as the jury. Fantastic. So, general, we're not allowing sequestrations. There are no bench conferences unless something comes up that's very unordinary for us to go through. There's no non-evidentiary motions except for emergency basis, and the emergencies, I said, must be very unusual to have happen. So there is no voir dire of lay witnesses allowed. There may be very brief voir dire witnesses to the experts, but it must be very brief. And then use of notes. You may communicate during the trial with each other verbally or through the use of notes. I'm taking that to mean that you may be able to private chat with your own team member. I'm going to take that on everyone's good faith that you will not be, because the rules say you cannot give notes to the other competing teams. So I'll just ask that everybody follow through with the rules as best as possible. We're all on our own honor here. Since we're doing this by computer, it's certainly available to be able to go forward with cheating on this. And I'm sure everyone here will do a fantastic job of following all of the rules. So we have opening statements. Direct examinations are 25 minutes each total, including any type of reserved. Then for cross-examination, 20 minutes total. Opening statements are 5. Closing arguments then are also 5 minutes. Everything must be reserved properly or it may go away. All right, so we've got the timekeeping and we got our timekeepers up and ready to go. All right, Pedro, are you ready to time for me? Thumbs up. Fantastic. And Michelle, are you ready to go? We got our timekeepers ready to go. All right, then we may go ahead and start our process. Who will give the opening statement for Team Wheatgrass?
I will be giving the opening statement, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Ms. Hellberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, Your Honor, and the jury. Let me introduce today's case to you. We are speaking for our client, Ms. Dakota Weirs. She has recently been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer. For her, as that would have been for anyone, that was a devastating diagnosis. It has impacted almost all aspects of her current life and future. To name just a few examples, it caused her great physical pain over a long period of time, made her unable to be involved with her community, and cost her her Juilliard scholarship, as she can't play the piano anymore, which had been a great passion of hers. It goes way further than that even, because she was planning on pursuing a career in concert piano with her training at Juilliard as a base. Now, neither of that is probably ever possible. Now, what does that all have to do with the defendant, Lush Fertilizer? Well, since she was 14, Ms. Weirs has been working for a landscaping company, Haven Landscaping. Her primary job was spreading seed and fertilizer, one of them being Lush Fertilizer. Then, just before she was set to leave for Juilliard, Dakota started to feel sick, experienced rapid weight loss, swelling, fatigue, physical pain, and depression, and was finally diagnosed with cancer. She did not connect her job with her illness at first, until she saw a story about Lush Fertilizer and Drufo, the key ingredient in their fertilizer that helped set off Lush's big success in the industry. The leaked documents revealed that this ingredient, Drufo, can cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma. After Ms. Weirs has been working with it for years, that finally caused her to make the connection between her illness and the fertilizer. Especially enhancing the suspicion was to her that her twin, Skylar Weirs, has not developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma, although the two shared every aspect of their lives. Well, everything except working with Lush Fertilizer. As our first witness, Ms. Weirs herself is going to speak and tell you about her devastating story with cancer. She will tell you about how she used Drufo, not knowing about the dangers, as the labels did not even slightly mention the possibility of such illness, which ended so fatally for Ms. Weirs. It is for sure that she would have done things differently had she been properly informed and could live her life now as she was supposed to live it, not suffering from cancer. Second, Mr. Carson Durst is going to speak as our witness. He has been working very closely with the development of Drufo. After discovering the danger and carcinogenic risks during an in-house study, he tried to voice those to his superiors and even the CEO himself, like Doncord. They shut him down and tried to silence any concerns about Drufo at all. After his work environment kept getting more and more negative, his career in the company ended with being fired. Our last witness will be Dr. Casey Rogers, an expert in agriculture and chemistry. He has several publications about Drufo and its direct correlation to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He will lay out the often permanent symptoms that patients, including Ms. Weirs, have to go through, as well as the environmental causes of cancer, including pesticides. He confirms, after reviewing Ms. Weirs' medical data, that that was very likely the reason for her illness. Even the CEO of Lush himself, like Doncord, is going to have to admit later that even he got advised by his experts to bake Drufo before putting it in the fertilizer, because that could have eliminated any of the carcinogenic particles. He decided not to do that. Why? Because it was expensive. The company made far greater profits by not baking it. So in the end, we're going to ask you to find Lush Fertilizer liable for purposefully putting out a dangerous product into the hands of the public while insufficiently labeling it. And while those dangers could have easily been chemically prevented, which consumers like our client, Dakota Weirs, have to suffer from in the end. They are the ones having to suffer through life-threatening and in every case completely life-changing illnesses like cancer, while Lush Fertilizer and their CEO earn more financial profit. We're going to be seeking compensation of $5 million. Although our client's life has now been irreversibly impaired by her illness and money will not make up for the years of her life that she lost, Lush should at least attempt to compensate for what they did. This includes the future and career Ms. Weirs lost with her scholarship and inability to play piano, the extreme physical and mental pain she has suffered so far and will suffer from in the future, the emotional trauma and distress she obtained from the diagnosis, like the depression she got, and finally, the quality of life that has been permanently impaired by her illness. That is why we urge you to find Lush Fertilizer liable and make them finally compensate Dakota Weirs with what she deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Helbig. Opening statements then for St. Augustine.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may, please.
Lush's warnings were thrown to the wind. Dakota Weirs has sued Lush Fertilizer, saying their products, specifically Drufo, gave him non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Dakota Weirs will claim that Lush Fertilizer, of all the fertilizers he used as a landscaper, was negligent. However, while attempting to prove that Lush was negligent, he will tell you how, as a landscaper, it sometimes became a little bit too hot outside, and he liked to feel the breeze against his face and skin. Dakota Weirs will tell you that despite the warnings on the packages and the warnings from his boss, he did not wear a face covering or even a long sleeve shirt or gloves. Why? Because it was just too hot outside. He was uncomfortable. Years later, he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and while laying on the couch one afternoon, he saw an ad on his TV for a law firm saying that Drufo, a bonding agent used in Lush Fertilizer's products, may potentially cause lymphoma. So, despite the fact that Dakota Weirs had used many other fertilizers with many other dangerous chemicals, all without proper safety equipment, he decided to sue Lush Fertilizer for all of the damages. Any reasonable person would have worn the proper protective gear, even if it was a bit too hot outside. Caution, hazards, causes irritation, wear proper protective clothing. All warnings that, as you will see today, were thrown to the wind. Dakota Weirs will tell you that Drufo was outlawed in the EU and other countries. However, this argument will quickly be discredited by the defense's last witness, Dr. Devin Williams, as he explains the reasoning behind its illegalization. Dakota Weirs will tell you that their twin, Skylar Weirs, did the same things besides landscaping as him, and she never got lymphoma. However, he will forget that he used hundreds of other harmful chemicals, again, without any protective gear during his work as a landscaper. He will try to discredit Skylar Weirs, saying that she has personal issues. However, these issues would be negated if Dakota Weirs were to win the lawsuit and the huge amount of money that comes with it. Yet, Skylar Weirs will testify against Dakota Weirs here today. The plaintiff will bring forward Carson Durst, a prior employee of Lush Fertilizer, who was fired due to his lack of a strong work ethic and his entitled attitude. But where does he work now? At Terra's Greenery, one of the biggest competitors to Lush Fertilizer. And what does he do there? He oversees the development of Terra's Greenery's competitor to Lush's best-selling fertilizer. So naturally, he would take every opportunity to tear down his competition. He will tell you stories of how Drufo was developed in the seemingly secret and guarded approach that Lush Fertilizer used when dealing with the findings of their experiments. Finally, the plaintiff will bring forward Casey Rogers. Dr. Rogers will lead you through his unpublished, unrepeatable studies and attempt to persuade you that Drufo does in fact cause lymphoma. Then the defense will call Blake Doncourt to the stand. The CEO of Lush Fertilizer will reinforce that the fact that Dakota Weirs used many different fertilizers during his days as a landscaper, and in every instance, he threw the warnings to the wind. However, she will also say that she doesn't even blame Dakota Weirs for the lawsuit. She blames the money-hungry lawyers behind the advertisement. She will give you background on Carson Durst, saying that his complaints about Drufo only arose as he climbed the ranks at Terra. Lush Fertilizer's biggest competitor because it was in fact his job to prove any dangers of Drufo during its development. She will also provide evidence for why Lush Fertilizer does not bake Drufo or any of its other chemicals. After Ms. Doncourt's testimony, the defendant will bring forth Skylar Weirs. She will tell of her extensive research and the difficulties she will tell of her extensive research, and despite the fact that she and her twin are having financial difficulties, she would rather fight for what is right, not what gets her out of debt. Skylar Weirs will bring forth hundreds of hours worth of research, all proving that Drufo is not carcinogenic in humans. Finally, Dr. Devin Williams will take the stand. She will tell you about the importance of Drufo, why it is created, and why the EU and other countries banned it. Finally, she will debunk the conclusions of Dr. Rogers' experiments, as she gives a summary of the statistics proving the cause, or the inability to prove the cause, of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We are all sorry that Dakota Weirs has been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and we wish him the swiftest recovery. However, you cannot be influenced by sympathy, and you will see today that it cannot be proven that Drufo caused Mr. Weirs' cancer, or even any cancer in general, and that Dakota Weirs did blatantly throw Lush's warnings to the wayside.
Thank you very much. All right. We're then ready for plaintiff's case in chief. First witness then for Team Wheatgrass.
Okay. Hi, Your Honor. I am Adrian Dries. I am the lawyer for the prosecution in this case. And right now I will be directing Dakota Weirs. So may I ask your permission to call Dakota Weirs to the stand?
We'll call Dakota Weirs. We already have the swearing in. We'll start the time now. Thank you for the reintroduction since we have the different name tags. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Mrs. Weirs. I have a few questions for you today. So, could you state your name for the record?
My name is Dakota Weirs.
And how old are you?
I am 20 years old.
Pause the time for a moment for both teams. Ms. Dakota Weirs, I'm barely able to hear you as you're coming through over the play. So I don't know if you get closer to the microphone or move the microphone. You're on pause right now. I want to hear you again. Cannot hear you right now. Nothing right now either.
Can you hear me now?
I can now. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
All right, start that back up. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Let me just turn on my video again. Okay. So could you state your name for the record?
Dakota Weirs.
And how old are you?
I'm 20 years old.
Okay. Do you have any particular hobbies or interests?
I work in my community any way that I possibly can. I was helpful in school. I was in the National Honor Society. I try to get involved as much as possible. I even helped at the old homeless shelter.
And what kind of jobs have you had in the past, if any?
I've been working at Haven Landscaping for about 6 or 7 years now.
And how long have you been working with Haven Landscaping?
For 6 or 7 years.
Okay, sorry. Do you still work there?
I don't, unfortunately. My illness has made it so that I am unable to even sit without a backrest for a long time.
And why have you stopped working there?
Due to my illness, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which I believe that Lush Fertilizers has caused.
So have you been officially diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
I have indeed. I've been to multiple doctors. It took a while to get the diagnosis, but we've got it now.
So how has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma affected your mental health?
It's been horrible for me. I haven't been able to do anything that I've loved. I've barely been able to get out of bed the first couple of months that I was diagnosed and going through all the different treatments.
And how has it affected your ability to interact with your community?
I haven't even been able to go outside. I haven't been able to go to school. I had a scholarship for Juilliard that I haven't been able to go to.
So how do you think it has affected your ability to engage in your interest and hobbies? I know you mentioned Juilliard, so could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. I play piano. I was well known throughout the state. It made me feel close to my grandpa, who died when I was about 7 years old. He was the one who got me into being into piano. And so since I've gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I haven't even been able to sit at the piano. I've been too weak, and I get bruises from playing just the easiest concerto.
So do you believe that lush fertilizer was the reason for your disease?
I do indeed. I believe that Durfo and Lush fertilizer was the issue.
And how did you come to this conclusion?
I had seen some research done on it, and that showed it was carcinogenic. And also, with the help of my father and my manager, we looked at different labels on Durfo and Lush fertilizers. And we had found that it was outlawed in multiple areas, such as Côte d'Ivoire, France, certain places like that, but it was allowed here in the US.
Okay. So you had no clue that the specific chemical in this product was potentially carcinogenic at the time of your usage?
Heavens no, how could I?
Yeah. So could you look into your materials for Exhibit 1 real quick?
There.
Okay, let me just screen share that real quick. Okay, so we're going to screen share Exhibit 1. Can you guys hear me? Your Honor, permission to screen share Exhibit 1.
Any objection to sharing exhibit number 1?
We can't hear you.
No objections, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Cheney. Go ahead then, Mr. Ruiz.
Okay. Goodness gracious. So I'm having difficulties now with the objection.
We've got an agreement. I think the scores, if you want to, you can go ahead and review their Adobe formatted exhibits. Which exhibit are we looking at then, Mr. Ruiz?
Exhibit 1.
Exhibit number 1. All right, so I'll go ahead and direct then all the scores to go ahead and take a look at their PDF, exhibit number 1. You may proceed,
Okay.
Mr. Ruiz.
So, okay. So are you familiar with this exhibit, Ms. Weirs?
Indeed I am.
And what does this exhibit show?
Shows what was on the package of Lush fertilizers.
So is this the exact label of the product in which you used while working at Havens Landscaping?
It is, yes.
Okay, so Your Honor, I would like to admit Exhibit 1 into evidence.
All right, is there any objection for exhibit 1, Ms. Cheney?
No objections, Your Honor.
1 is accepted, thank you.
Sorry, I can't hear anything. Objection. Okay, thank you. So, how much time do you think you spent interacting with this product?
For at least 4 or 5 years.
So, are there any warnings or suggestions on this label?
There's safety recommendations, and it says to.
I'm sorry, I'll have to pause that again.
So,
Ms.
can you
Weirs,
point to
I'm
me where in
barely
this
able-
label?
Mr. Ruiz, I'm sorry, sir. I can barely hear your witness in her responses. Not hearing anything from you, Ms. Ivory.
Can you hear me now? Your
I can now, thank you. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna
Sorry,
ask
that
the
was my bad.
scores, if you could, I'm gonna have you guys go to a blank screen just to make sure it's not a bandwidth issue for us. And that'll save a little bit of bandwidth for everyone. All right, thank you. All right, you may go ahead and continue, Mr. Ruiz.
Perfect. Okay. So, how much time do you think you spent interacting with this product?
I've been working with it for as long as I've been working there.
And are there any warnings or suggestions on this label?
There is user safety recommendations, and they also have a saying that says if you get it in your eyes, just wash out.
And can you point to me where in this label does it mention that this product carries a risk for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Nowhere.
So did you ever wear protective gear or clothing?
I didn't. It was not enforced at my work.
So how many people wore protective clothing and gear to protect themselves from harmful chemicals over at
Objection relevance.
All right, objection to relevance, Mr. Ruiz.
So I'm asking right now because I want to know if how many people wore the protective gear and clothing over at Havens, and this is important towards knowing whether or not she was acting in conformity with others, or because she was acting as a separate user.
All right, any response to that to Ms. Cheney?
Your Honor, this case has nothing to do with the other people who worked for Lush Fertilizer. We are dealing with only Dakota Weirs here and only her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
All right, I'll find the question to be relevant enough to go ahead and be heard and asked in this case. I'll overrule the objection, though it is a very fair objection. Ms. Weirs, I'm still having difficulty hearing you again, so if we just keep watching that as we go through. You may continue with your direct examination, Mr. Ruiz.
Okay. Did you guys ever work with the product indoors?
We did often.
Okay. Let me just turn down my volume down because there's echo. Okay. So had you had known about Drupa potentially causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, would you have taken different precautions when dealing with Lush Fertilizer, such as wearing protective gear and respirators, or using it only outside?
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on. Do you have a twin?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and what is their job?
They are journalists.
So how would you describe your relationship with your twin sibling?
Sorry, can you hear me?
I'm unable to hear you right now.
Can you? Awesome. Sorry, will you repeat the question?
Yes. So do you have a twin?
I do have a twin, yes.
And what is
Objection
their job?
relevance.
All right, Mr. Ruiz, relevance to a twin?
Sorry. I know I have to turn on my volume real quick. Sorry, Your Honor. Okay, so could you repeat that, Your Honor?
There was an objection to asking questions about her twin.
Yeah, so I'm laying foundation right now as to her relationship with her twin and to see how that affected Dakota in the workplace.
So
And
only
because-
about the relationship and her working in the workplace?
Right, at New Haven. So I just want to know the relationship and whether that there's okay, and because Skylar is going to testify later on in trial today.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up on when that went through, Mr. Ruiz. Plus, I'm getting a weird feedback back into my own system right now. What was the last part of
Okay.
your argument?
Yeah, I said that Skylar's going to be testifying today later in court. So I want to lay a foundation right now.
Fair enough. I'll find it relevant. I'll overrule the objection. You may continue.
Okay. So given the fact that you are twins, why do you think that you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and they don't?
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma isn't about the place where isn't about genetics or what your relationship is to someone. It's about the environmental factors that you're in.
Objection,
Perfect.
lack of personal
So-
knowledge.
There's been an objection to a lack of personal knowledge to that. Any response?
Well, I think my client knows very well that that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is not a genetic disease because she was the one that spent researching it after getting it. And so I think she's well informed enough, especially after dealing with doctors, that this is in fact not a genetic disease.
All right. Any response to that, Ms. Cheney?
Your Honor, this witness is not a doctor. She does not have the ability to say what factors played into her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
All right. I'm going to sustain the objection. These questions are getting into expert testimony, and I think we'll have other experts to be able to answer those, but I'll sustain that objection. All right. Next question then.
Yes. So what does your future with this disease look like in concerns to mental health?
I don't exactly know. It's going to be rough, that's for sure.
And what does it look like for your financial future?
Absolutely rough. I don't know where my treatments are going to go with my non-Hodgkin's, and I'm not sure what jobs I'll be able to pick up in the future.
And what does it look like for your future in terms of musical career?
Essentially gone. I couldn't go to Juilliard. I can't even play piano on my own. It's going to be very rough.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Your Honor, you're muted.
Thank you. Try to be on top of that. Thank you for letting me know. Ms. Cheney, this is your witness.
Yes, it is.
You may proceed.
You have always worked for a fertilizer company?
I have always worked with Haven Landscaping, yes.
Since you were 14?
Yes.
And your main job was spreading the fertilizer?
Yes, it was.
And you were fine with it?
Yes, I loved my job. I loved being outdoors and indoors and working with plants.
And while you worked for this company, you used many different fertilizers.
Well, sure. It depends on the type of plants that we were using.
Now moving on. When handling the fertilizer, you were required to wear protective gear, correct?
We were supposed to, but it wasn't exactly enforced when it came to our job there.
This protective gear included long sleeves,
Yes.
a mask,
Yes, that is true.
long pants,
Yep.
gloves,
Yes.
and this was all for your safety.
It was for our safety, but like I'd said, not many people did it at our work. And it also wasn't enforced at our workplace. It was recommended.
In fact, your boss told you to wear a mask,
Yes, but it was never enforced.
and you chose to you never chose to never wear the appropriate clothing.
Yes, I didn't. I felt it was uncomfortable, and also no one else was there to enforce it, and no one else who I worked alongside also wore protective gear.
Ever?
Hardly ever.
Because it was too hot outside.
Yes. Wouldn't you like to have some shorts when you're working outside?
And you liked feeling the wind in your face.
I do. I love being outdoors.
You wore shorts instead of long pants.
I did. It was hot outside.
And you wore a t-shirt instead of long sleeves.
Yes, like I've said, it was hot outside when I worked outside.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that I ask opposing counsel to direct their attention to what has been previously marked, or that has been marked as Exhibit 1. And I ask that Ms. Veers does the same.
I'm there.
Ms. Weers, have you seen this before?
I have, yes.
This is the label of the fertilizer, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You said there weren't precautions posted.
I never said that they weren't posted. I said that they were recommended. Of course, there were precautions. It's a fertilizer.
Will you please read along as I read under the second column with the bold highlight hazards?
Yes.
Hazards. Keep out of reach of children. Now, will you follow along as I read under the bold highlight user safety recommendations?
Yes.
As with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator or N95 mask is recommended. Follow manufacturer's instructions for cleaning/maintaining personal protective equipment. Users should wash hands before and after use of this product. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I'll go ahead and let you proceed with redirect.
Okay. So, Ms. Weers, how many people wore protective clothing and masks in your job over at Havens Landscaping?
Very little to none.
And why not?
it was hot outside. We felt very uncomfortable in those. And like I said before, they're not enforced.
Okay. No further questions.
All right, based upon those questions, any recross examination, Ms. Cheney?
Yes, Your Honor. You never wore clothes outside.
I did wear clothes. I wore shorts and a t-shirt.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. I meant to rephrase that question.
You may.
You never wore protective clothing outside.
It was not enforced. So no, I did not.
Because, again, it was too hot outside.
Yes, and I enjoyed being outside. Any rational person would also wear shorts and a t-shirt.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. Then,
Your Honor.
yes, Ms. Al?
She's done. May I ask for 2 extra minutes to relocate our witnesses?
I cannot. Witnesses are an unavailability in that. I'm hearing other people talking, so I'm sorry. Ms. Al, I can't allow for extra time. There is no extension of times, and failure for a witness to be available already does count for that person getting a 0 in their score. So I'll call the next witness for Team Wheatgrass.
May I ask for 2 extra?
Ms. Helbig, I can't hear you.
Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to call Mr. Carson Durst to the stands.
All right, we will call then Carson Durst, already sworn in. This is your witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Durst, could you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Carson Durst.
Where are you currently
sorry.
employed?
Honor, I would like to ask for clarifications because there's something wrong in the time.
What is off with the time, Pedro?
Well, my chronometer still says there's still like 17 minutes left for St. Augustine, and Michelle said there was just 15.
So we've got over a 17 or 15-second discrepancy.
On the camera, don't move on your chair.
Well, the defense still has 16 minutes and 18 seconds.
All right. So I'm sorry, Pedro, you said the defense has how long?
16 minutes and 18 seconds.
18, and then you have for plaintiff how much time?
16 and 10 seconds. 16 minutes and 10 seconds.
10 seconds. All right. Ms. Al, what do you have?
I have 12 minutes for the plaintiff, and I
seconds.
have 14 minutes and 14 seconds for the defense.
All right. So I'm going to have you do that again. Unfortunately, I think, Pedro, if you could turn off your microphone, because I think I'm getting bleed over from other people. No, that's fine. Ms. Al, I'm sorry. Can you tell me again, how much do you have for defense left?
14 minutes and 14 seconds.
Okay. And how much time do you have for plaintiff?
12 minutes.
12 minutes flat? Yeah, shaking her head, yes. Okay, thank you. All right, so let me take the timekeeping rules. All right, I'm looking at rule 5.6.4, discrepancies in time between timekeepers. It's not surprising the times are different, quite honestly, because when one stopped or did not stop based upon really when I interrupted, because we're unable to hear witnesses or not because of that. So I believe that both timers are doing appropriately. They probably just starting off a little bit different than when each other would have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the greater time. Although I hate to go over, I'm going to find that for defense, they have 16 minutes, 18 seconds left. To the plaintiffs, then I'm going to find 16 minutes, 10 seconds. I'm giving that greater error because of the delays, unavailability to hear people as we're going through the process as well. So I'm going to give that to both sides the benefit of the extra time. I appreciate both timekeepers doing a diligent job on their times. Thank you very much. All right, we will go ahead then start with.
16 minutes, 18 seconds
I'm
left.
sorry, can you repeat how much time the plaintiff has left?
Yes, I've got, looks like I'm going to do 16 minutes and 10 seconds. For plaintiff, defense has 16 minutes, 18 seconds. All right, there we go. We've got that together. Ms. Helbig, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, Mr. Carson Durst, could you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Carson Durst.
Where are you currently employed?
I am currently employed at Terry's Greenery,
Where were you employed before that?
Lush Fertilizer.
What was your position in that company?
I was a product development engineer.
How close were you to the danger evaluation process of Drufo?
I was involved in 2 in-house studies of Drufo.
Did you notice any dangers about Drufo at all?
Yes, in my first in-house study, I found an English study that it was carcinogenic in rats. And in the second in-house study, it was brought to our attention that Lush Fertilizer was looking for possible carcinogenic effect of Drufo. So we would know that Drufo was possibly carcinogenic.
How did you document those dangers?
In my lab notebook,
Was that lab notebook checked by anyone?
yes, presumably it was checked by my superiors, such as Jerry Langley.
Did you try to express your concerns about Drufo in any other way?
Well, never face-to-face with any of my superiors. I documented it in my lab notebook. It was brought up in the second in-house study by another scientist. However, I never brought it up verbally.
About that study report, was everything that was found out in the study correctly reported in that report?
No. The report never once mentioned Hodgkin lymphoma, the fact that it was linked to cancer, and it was brought up by a scientist that they possibly found evidence of it being linked to cancer, and it was never found in that report.
So considering all that, would you say your superiors still knew of the dangers, for example, through that study that was done, or the dangers you documented in the notebook?
Yes, they knew.
Objection, speculation. You're muted, Your Honor.
Sorry, thank you. Ms. Helbig, any response then to the speculation objection?
Yes, Your Honor. I would say since Carson Durst was directly working with his superiors every day, and he knew that his superiors would be checking his notebook and that they were participating in the in-house study that was done, he can tell if they knew any carcinogenic risks or not that were brought up.
Okay, all right. So I think probably the best way is to probably lay a better foundation to the information that he would have knowledge of. And so I'll sustain the objection, but Ms. Helbig, I'll allow you to ask any more foundational questions you need to get to that question.
All right, thank you. Were your superiors supposed to check that lab notebook?
Yes,
And did they do that?
I cannot say for sure. They were supposed to, and I had trust in them that they were doing their job.
So would you say it was their job even to check that notebook about any concerns you might have documented in them?
Yes, it was their job.
So again, would you say with some certainty that your superiors still knew of the dangers?
Yes.
For example, through the notebook or the study that was done?
Yes.
How was the situation and work environment with your coworkers like?
Well, after my promotion from an intern to a product developer,
Objection,
you could say
relevant.
around the water cooler, a lot of people thought that
I'm sorry, Mr. Durst, there's been an objection. The objection, I'm sorry, Mr. Nauman?
Relevance, Your Honor.
Okay. Any response, Ms. Helbig?
Yes. I would say it's certainly relevant to Mr. Durst standing in the company and how that might have affected him expressing any concerns about Drufo to his superiors, how his work environment was like, and how much pressure he got from his superiors.
All right, thank you very much. I want to find that clearly relevant for his knowledge and the questions that will be coming up in the future. So I'll overrule the objection. You may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, could you continue and explain how the work environment with your coworkers was like?
Well, a lot of my coworkers and superiors thought that I was only promoted to a full-time position because of my relationship with Doncourt and the Doncourt family. I can say for sure that I was.
I'm going to pause time for the timekeepers for me, if you could. Mr. Durst, unfortunately, you're super choppy coming through. Mr. Reese, I've got your video feed. Can you go ahead and put yours to a black feed? That just may be the extra bit of bandwidth that we need. All right. Mr. Durst, I'm going to let you go and answer that question again. Do you need to have it repeated for you?
No, I understand the question.
All right. I'm going to have them start time, and then you
well,
go ahead.
My superior.
Good.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Your Honor. My superiors and coworkers all thought that my promotion was solely due to the fact of my relationship with the Doncourt family and Blake Doncourt himself. But I can say that this was not true whatsoever because I was qualified for this position on the product development team. I had a degree in I had a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. I had on-the-job work experience. So I was qualified for this.
Did you feel pressured by your coworkers or superiors not to express any concerns regarding this work environment?
Yes. I would say mostly I was pressured to leave out any information about Drufo in the second study. That's the time I felt most pressured from my superiors.
How did that negative work environment affect your work there?
Well, I don't think it affected my work at all. I am very hardworking and skillful in my position. It did affect most people at the company's opinions on me, unfortunately. They were all untrue and pretty much just rumors.
How would you say that personal relationship to Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush, affected your termination in the company?
Well, it hurt the most because I felt that I was betrayed by Blake. I've known Blake almost all my life, and he is the father of my best friend growing up. And he helped me gain my internship, and I felt very betrayed by him.
Do you think the fact that you discovered and spoke of the dangers of Drufo ever so slightly might have been a reason for being fired?
Well, I think it affected my relationship with my superiors, including Blake Doncourt. Me speaking out about Drufo affected my reviews as a client of theirs.
Objection, speculation.
Any response, Ms. Helbig?
Yes. I think that speaking of how his relationship to Blake Doncourt was impacted is not a speculation. That is a thing he personally witnessed.
All
May
right.
I respond, Your Honor?
You may, Mr. Nom. Go ahead.
Your Honor, the witness just testified that the fact that Drufo that he spoke out against Drufo affected his relationship, and he has no idea why the relationship could have turned south.
Okay. I'm going to overrule the objection. I'll go ahead and let the jury make a determination, the believability of the statement or not, but I'm going to find the question relevant enough to go ahead and go forward. All right. May continue, Ms. Helbig.
That is all the questions I had, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Nauman, I'll go and allow you to perform your cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. You worked for Lush Fertilizer.
Yes.
Your main job there was to test their product safety.
Yes.
You researched Drufo.
Yes.
Drufo contains many different chemical compounds,
Yes.
but you were given the job of researching just one of them.
I believe that is true.
You found studies on rats.
I found a study, an English study, that it was carcinogenic in rats, the chemical compound of Drufo.
But not a single report on humans.
No, it had never been tested.
Your coworkers also did research
Yes.
on the other chemicals in Drufo.
I know that they did research. I am not sure on the exact chemical compound that creates Drufo, but in general, they were researching Drufo. I cannot say for each one what exact.
One of your
chemical.
superiors compiled all the research.
Could you repeat the question, please?
One of your superiors compiled all the research
Yes.
and put it into one report,
Yes.
and they sent it to your superiors.
Yes. They.
But you can only speculate about what happens after that point.
Yeah. I was part of the product development team at the time. I was not a high-ranking member of.
You can only speculate as to what happens after that point.
Some could say.
Lush Fertilizer has the best-selling fertilizer on the market.
Yes.
And you work at Terra's Greenery,
Yes.
one of Lush Fertilizer's biggest competitors.
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Your Honor, this goes to prove bias that is very relevant to the case.
You're muted, Your Honor.
Sorry about that. Sorry. I'm going to find the question relevant, overrule the objection. Bias is always a relevant issue, questioning witnesses. You may continue.
You oversee the development of Terra's Greenery's fertilizer,
Yes.
a fertilizer that you hope will surpass Lush Fertilizer's best-selling product.
Yes, I believe it has already surpassed. The market just has not caught up yet.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge.
All right.
Yeah.
Any response to that?
Your Honor, I would ask the plaintiff to explain their objection.
The witness cannot make any valid statements about the financial situation of Terrace Greenery, as no findings of their financial situations have been admitted to evidence so far. And he just works there and is not part of the financial team or compartment whatsoever.
Your Honor, I would say that I did not ask the witness to talk about Terrace Greenery's financial situation, just about the fertilizer and his hopes with the fertilizer that he is developing.
All right. The question I recall is about whether it surpassed or not and whether he has personal knowledge to that. So I'm going to sustain the objection, but you can still ask questions about foundation if you want to ask that question. All right. You may continue.
Okay. You went to see Blake Doncourt, the CEO, about Jerry Langley,
Yes.
claiming that they were being unfair to you,
Yes.
and Blake Doncourt dismissed you,
Blake Doncourt did dismiss me. Yes.
saying you needed to just do your job.
Mm-hmm.
And you decided after that to search for new jobs
Yes.
and applied for the opening at Terrace Greenery.
Well, I would like to correct myself. I started looking for a new job in my second meeting with Blake. That was months later. So the time you're mentioning is a completely different date, and I was still hard at work at Lush Fertilizer.
After a meeting with Blake Doncourt, you applied for an opening at Terrace Greenery
Yes.
because it would make Blake Doncourt angry.
No.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
All right. Any response to that, Mr. Nauman?
Your Honor, the witness clearly stated in their testimony that they applied for the job at Terrace Greenery in order to make Blake Doncourt angry.
And I'm sorry, can you repeat?
On Your Honor.
Sorry, Ms. Helbig. Mr. Nauman, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Because it would make Blake Doncourt angry.
Okay. Ms. Helbig, any other response?
Yes. The witness statements are not in evidence, and you cannot ask Mr. Carson Durst about anything that he said in the witness statement and take it as evidence.
Okay. It's my mind. I'm trying to think about whether or not he would have knowledge of the statement. Okay, so the objection really was speculation. So I'll sustain the objection. If they can come to a foundation to come back to ask that question, I'll allow that, but I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. May opposing counsel refer to what has previously been marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 5?
I'm there.
Please turn to the second page.
I'm there.
That is your signature,
It is.
and this is a non-compete agreement.
It is.
Your Honor, I move the court to enter what has previously been marked as Exhibit 5 into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit 5?
No objections, Your Honor.
5 is accepted.
This agreement forced you not to work at any competing company.
It states that I'm not allowed to find a new position within the 6-month period. Yes.
And you were hired by Terrace Greenery
I was.
immediately after being fired by Lush,
I was.
but you don't remember signing this document.
No, I don't remember signing it at all. It must have been, it says right here, June 1st, 2003. That was near the beginning of my internship. And 3 years later, I cannot say that I remember very well at all signing this.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Objection, Your Honor. Argument of the question.
Okay, any response to that, Mr. Nauman?
Your Honor, I would ask the plaintiff to again explain their objection.
I'm going to overrule the objection, so I'm not going to worry about going through the explanation. I'll find it's an appropriate question to be able to ask that witness. So we're fine there. No other questions. Then we've got back then to you, Ms. Helbig. Any redirect?
I do indeed have a redirect, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Mr. Were you aware and had access to the results of the in-house study that was done on Rufo?
Yes, every employee in my team, the product development team, did receive a copy. And again, it did not mention non-Hodgkin's lymphoma anywhere or any type of cancer.
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of cross.
Any response to that, Ms. Helbig?
Can you repeat the objection, please, defense?
I objected to outside the scope of cross-examination.
I would like to repeat my question, Your Honor, please.
I'm sorry, Ms. Helbig, it broke up for me for a moment.
Okay. Did you have access
I'll
to
sustain the objection then for the record. You may continue, Ms. Helbig.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't hear that. You cut off. That was all the questions for redirect that I had, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nominee, then, based upon those, I think maybe 2 questions, any cross-examination for you, sir?
None, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. So we'll go ahead and call then next witness then for Team Wheatgrass. So we have Ms. Jones here.
Plaintiff would like to call Dr. Casey Rogers.
All right, we'll call Dr. Casey Rogers, already been sworn in as a witness. This is your witness.
All right, thank you. Would you state your name for the record?
My name is Dr. Casey Rogers.
What is your education experience?
I earned my PhD in agriculture and entomology from the University of California at Berkeley, as well as a bachelor's degree in agriculture and chemistry from the Colorado State University.
Thank you. And what is your profession?
I currently work as a professor in the horticulture and entomology department at the University of California at Berkeley.
And have you been published once or numerous times?
I have been published numerous times.
What were your publications about?
I've published articles on weed resistance to Drufo, and most relevant to this case would be a couple of articles relating to the human, like Drufo effects on humans and Drufo potentially being carcinogenic and toxic.
Your Honor, I offer Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert in pesticide chemistry and toxicology.
Any objection from St. Augustine?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, I will find then Dr. Rogers to be an expert in that field. You may continue.
Has your research been used before in advisory boards, recommendations, and litigations?
Yes, it has indeed.
Can you tell the jury what non-Hodgkin lymphoma is?
Non-Hodgkin lymphoma is a very specific type of cancer that affects the white blood cells called lymphocytes, which means that a person with non-Hodgkin lymphoma would be left immune compromised or more susceptible to disease because those lymphocytes are not functioning to help the immune system and getting fluids around the body.
And what are some of the symptoms that a person suffering from this would experience?
A person suffering from non-Hodgkin lymphoma could experience tiredness, weight loss, anemia, itching all over the body, and as we can tell from our witness Dakota Weir's, great suffering and obviously more susceptible to disease as well.
Is non-Hodgkin lymphoma genetic?
No, it is not genetic.
Can it only be caused by environmental conditions?
Precisely.
What are some environmental conditions that can cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Typically, it would be caused by exposure to an environmental condition or a chemical such as Drufo.
And can non-Hodgkin lymphoma ever be cured?
No, it cannot be cured.
What effects does Drufo have in rats?
Drufo has been proven to be carcinogenic in rats.
And you conducted a study on the effects of Drufo. What were the conclusions of that study?
In the study, I was measuring exposure to Drufo in people who were not exposed on a regular basis and people who were exposed on a very regular basis. And the study found that those exposed very commonly to the toxic chemical were up to 10 times more likely to be diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
So is there a correlation between exposure to Drufo and non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
In my very professional opinion, yes.
Was Dakota Weers the only person to develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma due to Drufo exposure?
No.
Objection outside the scope of the problem.
I'm sorry, the objection again there, Mr. Steed?
I objected to outside the scope of the problem.
Okay, any response to that, Ms. Helbig?
Yes, I think very much that Dakota Weers being I believe very much that Dakota Weers being not the only person to develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma due to exposure to Drufo proves that Drufo definitely has higher chances of being the cause of Dakota Weers non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection. I think that's an important question for the jury to consider as far as we go through the trial. So overruled. You may continue, Ms. Helbig.
Was Dakota Weers diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Yes.
And was Drufo ready to be put on the market?
Again, in my professional opinion, it was absolutely not ready to be put on the market.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
All right, Mr. Steed, cross-examination.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. When dealing with fertilizer of any kind, proper protection should be used.
Of course.
This proper protection involves a face mask,
Typically,
long sleeves,
yes.
long pants,
Yes.
gloves,
Not under my recommendations, but yes.
when dealing with specifically Lush fertilizer, this same protection should be used.
On the packaging of Lush fertilizer, I believe gloves were listed.
All right, now let's move on to your personal experiment. There's a control group who had never been exposed to Drufo,
That is correct.
one that was occasionally exposed to Drufo,
Yes.
and one that was frequently exposed,
Yes.
which is most often farmers.
Farm laborers working with crops using Drufo on a very regular basis, yes.
Who may have been exposed to other pesticides often,
Potentially.
or other fertilizers as well.
Potentially.
Not purely Drufo.
I am unsure of that answer.
Drufo is only in lush fertilizer. So if they're exposed to other fertilizers, that is not purely Drufo, correct?
It would be impossible for me to determine the exact fertilizers that those farm laborers would have been using.
Did you provide the published experiment for this case?
I did provide the experiment.
And the overwhelming outcome of this study was that this group had an increase in serious health conditions.
A very extreme increase in serious health conditions, yes.
Namely cancer,
Yes,
and specifically non-Hodgkin's lymphoma,
yes,
the same condition the plaintiff in this case suffers from.
yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Helbig? Sorry, Ms. Jones, we got the wrong name on there. I apologize. Ms. Jones, go ahead.
Were protective covers usually provided to workers?
No,
Was there sufficient time to study the long-term efficacy of protective equipment?
no, and that was because those protective covers were usually not provided to those workers.
And how did your study show that there was increased chances of non-Hodgkin lymphoma due to Drufo exposure?
By taking that control group compared to that group that had been regularly exposed and very regularly exposed, we were able to see the dramatic increase in the rate of non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
No further questions, thank you.
All right, any recross for you, Mr. Steed?
None, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. I think that concludes then Team Wheatgrass case in chief. We're ready then for Team St. Augustine. First witness for Team St. Augustine.
Your Honor, I would like to call Blake Doncourt to the stand.
All right, we'll call Blake Doncourt to the stand, already been sworn in as a witness. Mr. Steed, this is your witness, sir.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Blake Doncourt, Doncourt.
Why are you here today, Ms. Doncourt?
I'm here to defend my company, Lush Fertilizer, from the unbacked claim that we ignored a known carcinogen in our fertilizer.
How successful is your company?
We are largely successful. In fact, so successful that we can divert 10% of our profits to helping the environment. In fact, we have won awards for it. In 2019, we were awarded the SEAL Sustainability Award, and I myself was awarded the United Nations Champions of the Earth Award in 2020.
All right, let's move on to your fertilizer. Is there a warning on your fertilizer bag specifically for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
No, of course not. We had no real evidence to say that our fertilizer was linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, so there was no reason to put a warning on the package for it.
Is there any warning label on that bag for risks that may be presented by the fertilizer?
Of course, we want to keep our customers safe. When people are using it, we have warned them to cover their skin and their face and keep it out of their eyes and use proper protective gear.
Let's talk about Carson Durst. Who's Carson Durst in relation to you?
Carson Durst was a family friend and was my employee for a while. I helped him get a job at Lush Fertilizer for a while, but we had to fire him after many bad performance reviews.
What did Mr. Durst do for the company?
He was on our research and development team. It was his job to warn me if there were any dangers to Drufo, because that was what he was testing.
Did he ever notify you of any risks?
No, he never did.
Do you know if he's been employed since being fired?
Yes, he works at Terra's Greenery
now. What is Terra's Greenery in comparison to you?
Terra's Greenery is one of our biggest competitors.
Ms. Doncourt, do you have the exhibit booklet in front of you?
I do.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that I'm showing you an opposing counsel what was previously marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 4.
Before you came into court today, had you ever seen this document before?
No, I have not. Before this court case, we researched, we looked through all of our email files and we didn't find this anywhere in our database.
Where would Carson have found this email?
I don't know. I have never seen it before and we don't have it in any of our documents as an email that was ever sent to anyone.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Any response to the hearsay objection?
Yes, Your Honor. This is not hearsay. This is Ms. Doncourt's honest opinion on where she could have seen the email before, which she has never seen it.
So Ms. Helbig, what's the out-of-court statement that you're saying is hearsay? The document itself?
Okay, Your Honor, there is nothing in Mrs. Doncourt's witness statement that refers that they know of the email. Also, she is in the send to box, so the email is clearly addressed to Blake Doncourt, which is on there. So you could assume that she knows of the existence of this email.
Okay, so I'm not sure, is that an unfair extrapolation?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so under unfair extrapolation instruction, you, the scoring panelists, are the sole arbiters of the dispute based upon your own individual observations, good faith judgment, and consistent with the intent of the judicial process. You may decide that that statement is unfair, was no extrapolation, or the statement was not an unfair extrapolation, or the question did not ask for unfair extrapolation as it was not material, or the statement was unfair extrapolation, or the question was asking for unfair extrapolation as it was material. The ultimate decision is in the discretion of each of you individual scoring panelists. Consistent with your decision, you may award one or more points, deduct one or more points, or take no action at all with respect to any of the parties involved. If you determine there was no unfair extrapolation or there was no question asked for unfair extrapolation, you may deduct one or more points from the objecting party if you believe the objection was not made in good faith, was imprudent, or was poor sportsmanship. Your decision is final. I won't make any finding whether or not that was going to be an unfair extrapolation. That's for scorers only. I'm going to overrule the objection to hearsay. It's about the document, not what's contained inside the document. So I'll let you continue, Mr. Steed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Has Carson been untrustworthy about anything else?
Well, not that I know of, but I had never heard about this objection to Drufo's safety until this court case. When he was working for me, I never heard anything about its being unsafe.
Does Lush bake any of their products?
No, we don't need to. While baking certainly would remove any risk of Drufo being carcinogenic, there was never any evidence to say that Drufo was carcinogenic in the first place, so there was no reason to spend money baking fertilizer to alleviate a risk that wasn't there.
Is the profit involved in why you're not baking it at all?
Well, certainly, I am running a company and I need to be able to have money set aside to pay my employees and to cover our expenses. But that was not the only reason. When there's no reason and no risk for us to be getting rid of, then there was no reason to bake the fertilizer.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, thank you. My mute was going off. You may have your examination then, or cross-examination, Ms. Helbig.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Blake Doncourt, could you please look in your materials at Exhibit 4 that has previously been admitted to evidence?
Yes.
Are you familiar with that exhibit?
I am now.
Could you please read to me out loud who this email was addressed to?
Aaron Stevens, Adam Gwynn, Alex Monroe, Brad Skurlock, Bronwyn Yatabe, Carrie, Carson Durst, myself, John Schmidt, Judy Bishop, and Paula Duval, and Ryan Hewitt, and 7 others.
Is how your name is spelled there the correct spelling of your name?
It is.
So do you admit that this email has been addressed to you?
It has been addressed to me.
Can you please read out loud to me what the sensitivity label says on that email?
It says that it is confidential.
Would you say, as the CEO of a company like Lush Fertilizer, it is your job to read important emails, especially confidential ones?
Yes.
So would you admit that you would have had to read this email since it was addressed to you and since it was highly confidential and highly important?
Yes, I would have had to read it.
Do you recall reading it?
No, I don't think I ever received it.
So you say you think it's your job that you would have had to read it, but you don't think you did?
Yes, I don't think it was ever sent to me.
But you do admit that your name is in the, that this email was addressed to you. And that is
Objection
your
asked
job.
and answered.
Any response to that, Ms. Helbig?
No, this was just for clarification.
All right. I'm going to allow the question, but it's really not that big of a fact.
Okay. Ms. Doncourt, in fact, this is a confidential email that was sent from Gary Langley, the Drufo product manager, to several people, including you and Carson Durst, that was on the Drufo development team, right?
Yes.
Do you admit that in that email, the risk of Drufo being carcinogenic addressed by one of your coworkers to you was recognized?
Yes.
Thank you. So Carson Durst was closely involved with working with Drufo, as the email was also addressed to him as part of the team, right?
Yes.
Prior to this, you gave a witness statement. Is that true?
Yes.
Were you being truthful in that statement?
Yes.
In your witness statement, you mentioned that Carson had every opportunity to bring his concerns to your attention, right?
Yes.
Is it also true that you had trouble with your ex-wife at that time, as you mentioned in your witness statement?
Objection relevance.
Ms. Helbig?
This is relevant to the credibility and to the situation that CEO Blake Doncourt was in at the time, because his availability to his coworkers might have been affected by certain troubles in his social life.
All right, so it's laying a foundation. I'll overrule the objection, but we should get to the point fairly quickly. So you may continue.
Could those troubles with your ex-wife have possibly negatively impacted your availability for Carson Durst? As he mentioned, you were not willing to talk to him because of that when he tried to voice his concerns to you.
They certainly could have, and they might have at that minute, but no, they weren't affecting the way that I was working for my company.
So you knew of the possible carcinogenic effects of Drufo research in your own in-house study, right?
No, I did not. I never did a study, and I never received this email that has been shown in the exhibits.
Did you just agree that this was recognized in the email that you agree that you should have read?
Yes, if I had received it, and if it was ever sent to me, I would have read it.
You knew and got advised by your expert that, as you stated in your witness statement, baking the fertilizer could have removed any risk that the fertilizer might be carcinogenic for humans as well, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you look at Exhibit 8 in your materials, please?
Yes, I can.
Your Honor, jury, can you please look at Exhibit 8 as well? So, Exhibit 8 shows Lush's profit table provided by you, right?
Yes.
You still decided not to bake the fertilizer because this greatly increased your profit, as you show in that table, right?
Yes.
The baking costs would have been $250,000 yearly, increasing, right?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to move Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit 8?
No objection, Your Honor.
8 is accepted.
As you stated in your witness statement, you claim that if the accusation of Lush Fertilizer putting a dangerous product into the hands of the public for financial profit was true, there would be a paper trail, right?
Yes.
Would you agree that the email Exhibit 4 could have been called such a paper trail?
Yes, it could have been called a paper trail.
Is it also true that you did not publish any other financial findings?
Yes, that is true. I'm not aware that any company does.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Helbig. Mr. Steed, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Doncourt, had you ever seen this email before?
No, I never had until it was in this exhibit packet in court. I had never received this email.
So you don't recall seeing it at all either?
No, I don't recall it, and it's not in any of our email database.
If you would have gotten an email about any negative results of Drufo, do you think that you would have read it?
Yes, of course I would have, and I would have acted. I am an environmentalist, and I would never want to hurt the earth or any of my customers.
Had the lawyers looked through your email history before this case?
Yes, they did.
Did they find any incriminating evidence, including this email?
No, they did not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Objection,
All
Your
right.
Honor. Unfair extrapolation.
Objection to unfair extrapolation. Mr. Steed, any response to that?
This email is, Ms. Doncourt clearly states in her witness statement that she had never seen this email before. Yeah.
All right. I would go through, but I'm not going to read through the full unfair extrapolation instruction, just simply that they could find there's no extrapolation, there was no unfair extrapolation, or it wasn't material. There was an unfair extrapolation and it was material. And I'll let the parties decide whether points may be deducted or added to one side based upon the objection for unfair extrapolation. Thank you, Ms. Helbig. Thank you, Mr. Steed. Ms. Helbig, then any further examination for you?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Mrs. Doncourt, would you please look in your material at Exhibit 1?
Yes.
So do you agree that on this label, there are safety recommendations? And
Objection outside the scope of the witness.
All right. Any response to the objection for out of scope?
The witness has access to the exhibits, and she says she is looking at them right now.
Right. So based upon the questions asked by Mr. Steed, how is this not outside of the scope?
The CEO of the company, Mrs. Doncourt is the CEO of the company and makes this product and should be aware of the label that is on the product.
All right. I'm going to sustain the objection outside of the scope. The questions being asked by Mr. Steed. Do you have any questions within the scope, Ms. Helbig?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
All right. You may proceed.
Do you agree that on your product, there were safety recommendations and not safety warnings, as you mentioned?
Yes, of course there were.
But do you agree that they were recommendations and not warnings?
They are recommendations. There was no reason to warn about Drufo's dangers because there was no evidence that Drufo was dangerous, and there was no reason for us to warn our customers about it.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right. Thank you very much. That finishes examination then of Doncourt. Next witness then for Team St. Augustine.
The defense would like to call Skylar Weirs to the witness stand.
Thank you, Ms. Cheney. Ms. Weirs, you've already been sworn in as a witness. You may proceed, Ms. Cheney.
Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Skylar Weirs, Weirs.
What do you do for a living, Miss Weirs?
I am an investigative journalist for the Rationalist magazine.
And what is the Rationalist?
The Rationalist is a science education and advocacy magazine dedicated to debugging false information and working to stop the spread of irrationality in science.
And what kind of things do you write about, Ms. Weirs?
I myself have primarily written on the conflict between individual health and corporate policy.
And what are some specific topics you've written on?
Recently, my editor asked me to write a series of articles on modern agritech, specifically debating the causal link between Drufo and cancer.
And how long did you spend researching Drufo?
I spent a year researching for this article.
And can you explain to the jury what your research techniques were?
So I myself am an investigative journalist, not a scientist. So in researching for this article, I looked at what scientists in the field had to say about the topic. I looked at information put out by the United States Department of Agriculture, as well as the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. I looked at any publications put out by companies in the field, as well as research publications referenced in those documents from companies. I tried to look at general knowledge as well as historical and statistical knowledge to get the best overall picture of Drufo and cancer and modern agritech.
Your Honor, I move for the admission of this witness to be recognized as an expert in modern agritech, specifically Drufo.
All right. Any objection from Wheatgrass?
Yes, Your Honor. There is a lack of foundation here. Skylar has 6 years of journalistic experience, but very little experience in the field of science. Therefore, she can only be entered as an expert of journalism and therefore not have any input and get any opinions as to the seriousness or casual link of Drufo.
All right. Ms. Cheney, any response to that?
Yes, Your Honor. This witness has just testified that she spent nearly a year of lengthy research on studying this specific topic of Drufo. So she is therefore qualified to be an expert in modern agritech, specifically Drufo.
All right, thank you. I've got the pretrial ruling signed by Judge Ashley Stabb. Looks like that was done on November 1st of 2021. Her ruling requiring the Rule 702 5 factors listed in the rule: knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education. If they're confirmed at trial, it's really to establish whether the witness has any specialized knowledge beyond that held by the average juror, which is a fairly low standard on that. So it's up to the jury to make a decision whether or not that person's believable, but I'm going to overrule the objection, allow the finding of Ms. Weirs to be an expert in that field, and allow the jury to consider that. You may continue, Ms. Cheney.
Okay, now moving on. Who produces Drufo?
Lush Fertilizer produces Drufo.
Does anyone else?
No, it is unique to Lush Fertilizer.
And what is unique about Drufo compared to other fertilizers?
So all agricultural products, especially chemical ones, have some harmful elements. Drufo limits exposure to those harmful elements, which is safer for consumers.
And how does it do that?
Drufo is an incredibly effective bonding agent, so it stays in the soil longer, meaning that workers only have to apply it 1 to 2 times a year versus the several times a year that they would have to apply other fertilizers.
And is there anything else unique about Drufo?
Drufo is an incredibly effective pesticide as well on top of its fertilizer properties, which means that you don't have to add other pesticides on top of your regular fertilizer.
And are there any benefits to using Drufo instead of the other pesticides?
So most common pesticides like arsenic or glyphosate are poison and have shown links to cancer. Drufo does not have a definitive link to cancer the way that those do.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Right. Sorry. Thank you very much. Mr. Ruiz, cross-examination.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. So good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. I have a few questions for you today. All right. So you mentioned you work for a magazine. Is that correct?
Yes.
So could you repeat for us what's the name of the magazine that you published your article on?
The Rational magazine. The Rationalist.
Okay. Yes. And how long have you been writing for this magazine?
A few years.
Okay, so does this company provide enough income for it to be your only job?
May you repeat the question? You're cutting out a lot for me.
Sure. Let me see. Okay. So yeah, does this company provide enough income for it to be your only job?
No, it does not provide enough income to be my only job.
And you gamble, right?
I do.
So you are in serious need of economic
Objection,
stability.
relevance.
Relevance, Mr. Ruiz?
Of course, this is a question trying to get into Skylar's credibility.
How does gambling go to credibility?
Sure. So I think that there is alternative motives for her to testify here today, such as needing money. So I think that therefore she doesn't have enough. She has exterior motives for this. That's all I'm trying to say.
All right, I'll sustain the objection right now. I don't think I've got enough to go into that specifically to find that gambling would be an ulterior motive. So I'll sustain that. I'll let you ask any questions if you'd like, or you can move along.
Sure. So, Ms. Weirs, do you have a PhD?
I do not.
Did you ever graduate college?
I didn't. I wanted to focus on my writing.
Okay. Have you worked as a scientist?
I haven't. As I said, I'm a journalist.
And have you published any peer-edited scientific papers?
I haven't, but I've read many for this topic.
So by all sense of the word, you are a journalist, not a scientist. Am I correct?
Yes, as I've mentioned.
So would you also agree that any normal citizen can do their own research on a given topic, such as you did?
Of course, the rationalist encourages that. We want people to educate themselves.
So do you think that legitimate scientists who have PhDs and are licensed to perform their own experimental studies on Drufo know less about Drufo than you do?
I would never say that, but I certainly have looked at all the information on the topic. Some scientists may have just done research.
Okay, so let's move on. Would you agree that just because something has benefits in some respects, it does not make it a safe product?
May you repeat that?
Sure. So would you agree that just because something has benefits in some respects, it does not make it a safe product?
I would agree with that.
Okay. So could you look into your materials for Exhibit 3 real quick?
Of course.
And just let me know when you're there. You good? Okay.
Yeah.
So are you familiar with Exhibit 3?
Yes.
So what does this exhibit show?
This shows that this chemical causes an increased cancer effect in rats.
So could you read the first
Objection,
paragraph?
relevance.
Response to the relevance then, Mr. Ruiz?
Yes, I'm laying foundation right now as to if Skylar knows anything about any negative effects concerned with Drufo.
All right, Ms. Cheney, any response to that?
She has never mentioned this, and I never mentioned it in direct. So why is it relevant to her witness statement, to her testimony?
All right, fair enough. I'm going to allow the question. Ms. Weirs has been offered as an expert, and anything based upon her testimony that could lead one way or the other, I believe is going to be fair game. I believe that's a fair question. I'll allow the examination to continue in that area. You may continue, Mr. Ruiz.
So could you read the first paragraph of the conclusion section in this exhibit for me, please?
Yes. The results of this carcinogenicity bioassay, our first long-term carcinogenicity bioassay on C3NO9P, demonstrate that C3NO9P's potential carcinogenicity at a dose level close to a normal monthly intake for humans in occupations involving frequent, unprotected exposure to commercial fertilizers. Furthermore, the study demonstrates that when lifespan exposure to C3NO9P begins during early life, its carcinogenic effects are increased.
So, Your Honor, I would like to admit Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit 3?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, we'll take 3.
All right, perfect. So in your job, you would agree that it is your responsibility and your duty to provide people with the facts and information regarding science, right?
Of course.
So how important would you say it is for someone to provide adequate scientific information on something?
Very important.
So you are familiar with your studies on the harmful effects of nitrogen into the environment, correct?
I am.
So would you have informed people of these harmful effects?
I would have done.
So I would like to redirect your attention back to Exhibit 3. So do you think people should be informed about this exhibit?
Of course, science is about looking at all the sides and coming to a conclusion.
All right, so could you look in your materials for Exhibit 1, please? Okay, so are you familiar with Exhibit 1?
Yes, I am.
So could you point to me where in this label does it mention that this product is carcinogenic?
It does not, but there was no known carcinogenicity of
all the answer.
Drufo on humans.
Okay, so does the label mention anything about any of the chemicals in this product potentially causing cancer?
No, it does not, because the company was not aware of any proven link.
Thank you for your response. So if a company purposely knew that they manufactured a product containing a chemical compound that could cause cancer, and they decided to not conduct the necessary procedures to make the product safe, and they didn't leave a warning on that product showing this, do you believe that that company is performing their duty to inform people of science?
That company would not be performing their duty.
So Ms. Weirs, I leave you with this. Are you willing to make the argument that Drufo is undeniably, without a doubt, safe?
There is no way to make that argument about any product. Science is not about 100% certainty. Science is about the most likely and probable explanation. The most likely and probable explanation is that Drufo is not carcinogenic.
Yeah, no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cheney?
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. We'll conclude then with witness Schuyler then. Next witness then for St. Augustine.
Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. Devin Williams to the stand.
We'll call Dr. Williams to the stand. Thank you, Mr. Nauman. Dr. Williams has already been sworn in as a witness. You may proceed.
Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Devin Williams, Williams.
Dr. Williams, what is your job?
I lead the Toxicology Research and Development Department at Lush Fertilizer, and I'm the outgoing chair of the company's ethics committee.
How long have you worked at Lush Fertilizer?
I've been there for roughly a decade, and I've led the toxicology lab for 7 years.
Could you explain what this job entails?
I work to understand how the outdoor world will respond to outside influences, such as our fertilizer.
What training led you to this job at Lush Fertilizer?
My undergraduate at Colorado State University, my PhD, and my postdoctorate, which are detailed in my curriculum vitae, or CV.
Dr. Williams, could you direct your attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 9? Opposing counsel, please direct your attention to what has been previously marked for identification purposes as Exhibit 9. Do you recognize this document?
I do.
What is this document?
My curriculum vitae.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of your curriculum vitae?
Yes,
Does it properly list all of your education and experience?
it does.
Your Honor, I move the court to enter Exhibit 9 into evidence.
Any objection to Exhibit 9?
No objections.
9 is accepted.
Dr. Williams, could you give a list of the highlights of your education?
Yes, well, as I mentioned, I have a PhD and I have a specialized postdoctorate in pharmaceutical effects of drugs on humans, or pharmacotoxicology. And I have various accreditations in Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming.
Dr. Williams, do you have any publications?
I have several, such as the forensic aspects of poisons.
What other professional experience do you have?
I have my experience in the field in researching and evaluating test results to determine the effects of toxins.
What has this training allowed you to do at Lush Fertilizer?
It's allowed me to postulate as to broader outcomes of our fertilizer using our test results as a basis.
Could you explain what this means to the jury?
Yes, It means that I can determine whether or not something will be harmful to the human body and how to neutralize the negative effects if it would be.
Your Honor, I move the court to recognize Dr. Devin Williams as an expert in chemical toxicology, pharmacology, and research and development processes at Lush Fertilizer.
All right. Ms. Jones, any position for you?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right, I'll make those three requests then in those three areas and find that Dr. Williams is an expert in those three areas. You may continue, Mr. Nam.
Dr. Williams, how are you introduced to DRUFO?
I was introduced when about half the research and development team had already moved on to other ventures outside of the company.
Could you explain why DRUFO is used in Lush's fertilizers?
Yes, it is used because it specially binds to the grass and that prevents eutrophication.
What problem did DRUFO solve from prior fertilizers?
It's helping to solve the problem of excess nitrates.
What did that process lead, or why did that process lead to the development of DRUFO?
Well, nitrogen or excess nitrates in the ground leads to eutrophication, which is a buildup of chemicals that is harmful to animals and allows algae to bloom that is also harmful to humans. DRUFO is preventing this.
So why is DRUFO so important?
The way it binds to the grass allows it to be applied less and helps it to stick longer, so there is less nitrate runoff and less eutrophication overall.
Why is DRUFO banned in the EU?
It's banned because in scientific studies, it has been found to show the same nitrate accumulation as other fertilizers because it can be manipulated in a lab and does not show the same effects as it does in the real world.
And why is it banned in smaller countries such as Haiti or Liberia?
Unfortunately, they don't have enough money to do their own studies, so they use whatever the European Union uses.
Why didn't Lush Fertilizer fight the EU's decision if there was no concrete proof?
We were a very new company and it wasn't worth the fight.
Is there any study that proves that DRUFO causes lymphoma?
No.
Did you hear the testimony of Dr. Rogers earlier today?
I did.
Could you explain his experiment?
Well, his experiment showed different people who had all been exposed to different levels of DRUFO.
Is it important to compare those using fertilizers with DRUFO to those using fertilizers without DRUFO?
Of course it is. You have to compare like things to each other to get accurate results.
And what could bad comparisons lead to in the statistics?
They lead to biased results.
Are there any other problems with Dr. Rogers' statement?
Well, he does have strong financial bias.
In your expert opinion, did DRUFO cause the defendant's lymphoma?
Absolutely not. While it is very sad that Dakota Weirs has developed a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, it was not because of DRUFO.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, thank you. Ms. Jones?
All right. You have no publications on the effects of DRUFO, correct?
Sorry, you cut out. Could you please repeat that?
Yes, of course. You have no publications on the effects of DRUFO, correct?
I do not.
After the development of DRUFO, about half the team moved on, correct?
Yes.
And you were hired as a technician due to the large turnover, am I right?
I was.
In your witness statement, you state that there is a lot riding on your customer's success. Agreed?
Yes.
You stated your customer's success, not safety. Am I correct?
Yes.
In your witness statement, you stated that saying DRUFO is banned in France does not go far enough, correct?
It does not go far enough.
DRUFO is already banned in the European Union, correct?
Yes.
And the EU's concern with DRUFO is new fertilizer formulations that may contribute more than incidental nitrate accumulation. Agreed?
It is.
Yet your product supposedly fixes the problem of nitrate pollution, correct?
It does.
But the EU still banned DRUFO, am I right?
Yes.
And your product fixes the problem of nitrate pollution, correct?
It does.
Yet in your witness statement, you state that if you pour some into a petri dish and add the right bacteria, you will get just as many nitrates as regular fertilizer. Am I right?
Yes.
So the nitrate makeup is identical to other products, correct?
In a lab situation, yes.
And in your study, you conclude that there are low chances of sickness due to Drufo. Agreed?
Yes.
But there is still a risk, correct?
Yes, as could be said with almost anything else.
Thank you, but a yes or no answer will suffice. In your study, in your witness statement, you admit to being financially biased in this case, correct?
Yes.
And you are the outgoing chair of the ethics committee, correct?
I am.
Which means you are leaving the position, agreed?
What do you mean?
You are leaving the position of the ethics committee of the outgoing, you are leaving the position of the chair of the ethics committee, correct?
I'm sorry, I still don't understand your question.
You will no longer be the chair of the ethics committee, correct?
No.
So you are not the outgoing chair of the ethics committee?
I am the outgoing chair. That does not mean I'm leaving that position, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. As you state in your witness statement, Drupal product goals are to be industry leading, environmentally aware, and cost effective, correct?
Yes.
Customer safety was not listed in these goals, agreed?
It was not.
No further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Nauman, any other questions?
Briefly, Your Honor. Dr. Williams, could you discuss the importance and the difference between a lab setting and the real world?
Well, yes. In a lab setting, almost anything can be manipulated to react the way you want it to. In the real world, things do not react the same way because you can't control the settings.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jones?
Yes, can you explain to me why the EU was concerned about why the EU banned Drufo?
Objection outside the scope of redirect.
Ms. Jones, how was that within the scope of Mr. Nauman's other questions?
I'm sorry, I take back my questions. Other question.
No other questions? All right, thank you very much. Then we are finished with Dr. Williams. Thank you, Dr. Williams. We're then at, looks like closing arguments. Closing arguments then for Wheatgrass. All right, Mr. Ruiz.
Should I begin, Your Honor?
Please do.
Okay. May it please the court. Your Honor, members of the jury, this trial stands today as an important stepping stone for justice. The question that remains is whether or not that vote goes towards corporate greed and ignorance of consumer protection, or for my client who has lost access towards a universal right, the pursuit of happiness, and all at the hands of Lush Fertilizer. As the plaintiffs in this case, we had the burden of proving these simple points by preponderance of the evidence. The first one being that the defendant in this case, Lush Fertilizer, manufactured a fertilizer product containing a chemical compound known as Drufo. The second being that the defendant was negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care to prevent the product from creating an unreasonable risk of harm to persons who might reasonably be expected to use the product in a manner the defendant should reasonably have expected. The third being that Dakota Weirs was one of those persons the defendant should reasonably have expected to use the product. And the fourth being that Dakota had damages that were caused by the defendant's negligence while the product was being used in a manner that the defendant should reasonably have expected. After hearing testimony today from several accounts, including Dakota Weirs, our medical professional Dr. Casey Rogers, and Carson Durst, I see insurmountable evidence that all of these points were proven today in court. Dakota Weirs took stand today despite her painful and horrific disease of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and gave eye-opening testimony as to her condition and the fight she continues to have with it. Dakota was making her way through life as not just a person sitting at the sidelines, but as a community leader, an artistic prodigy, and as a loving granddaughter who cherished nothing more than to use music as a way to connect with her grandfather. Not only has she lost that connection, but she has no idea what the future holds for her. Every morning she wakes up not knowing if she will be able to breathe or not, or if her pains will be worse than before. And she also lives with the uncertainty of being able to use her scholarship to Juilliard. As for Dr. Casey Rogers, she stood stand today and used her legitimate scientific background and knowledge to prove to you that Dakota Weirs did in fact get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and all due to the primary chemical Drufo, which Lush failed to properly study, inform, and administer said chemical, with my client being at the receiving end of these improper studies. She conducted extensive research using well-conducted studies and gave empirical evidence that my client's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma did indeed come from her contact with Lush's product. This only gets worse when you take a look at Mr. Durst's testimony. Today at trial, where he demonstrated to us all of the different ways in which Lush Fertilizer attempted to downside the seriousness of Drufo's carcinogenic effects, and how, according to Carson, they purposely misled the public and kept information out of their studies. This concern of Drufo was clearly concerning enough for Lush Fertilizer to release a report as to how by baking Drufo, it could reduce its carcinogenic effect. But did they do that? Of course not. They decided to take profits instead of protecting my client and every other consumer of their product. This is a true act of corporate greed, and one that must not go unpunished. Dakota Weirs was clearly a reasonable user of their product. She never knew that the product could cause cancer, as it was not on the label, and if it had been there, she might have taken different precautions. So I leave you with this. No amount of money will ever be enough to compensate for the extreme mental and physical pains Lush Fertilizer has caused my client. But a $5 million compensation and finding Lush Fertilizer liable is the only thing that can provide Dakota with any sense of relief. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, then, Mr. Steed, you'll give closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, you may proceed.
Lush's warnings were thrown to the wind. We have heard about the plaintiff's blatant disregard to follow any safety precautions. She, despite the warning of her gardening company, chose to not use any protective equipment. She was swayed by the decision of others around her in her negligence. She even blames the landscaping company she worked for why she did not put protection over her skin and over her face. For this, she suffered the sad consequences. These consequences being the horrible condition of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Despite this horrible outcome, it was the plaintiff's decision to not cover up her skin and instead let her hair flow in the wind. Lush's warnings were thrown to the wind. First, we heard from Blake Doncourt, who, as a hardworking entrepreneur and eventually an owner of a successful company, Lush Fertilizer, made it evidently clear that she had pure intentions and would never purposely neglect the warning label on the back of the package. In fact, it was shown in Exhibit 1 to you all, the jury. She even gave lawyers access to the company's emails, and still nothing was found despite the wild accusations. Next, we heard from Skylar Weirs, Dakota's own sister. Even she was against her sister, the plaintiff, because she knows the accusations from her sister against Lush are not true. It was not Lush that caused the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, just that the warnings by Dakota Weirs were thrown to the wind. And lastly, we hear from Dr. Devin Williams, an accomplished expert in toxicology who has studied Drufo and the effects of it. She tells us how it is good for the environment and shows us Ms. Doncourt's pure intentions and environmental concerns, which she was helping to fix with Drufo in the first place. She brings up how Drufo is banned in the EU, but the reason for this is because the EU is more specific on what new fertilizers are allowed and not based purely on the appearance of Drufo in the fertilizer. Most importantly, she states how Drufo did not cause the cancer. She says that if any large group of people is using many different fertilizers and another large group of people is using Lush, this is not any evidence against Drufo, just that some people will get lucky, or in this case, will be negligent and therefore get sick. In our cross-examination, first, we heard from Carson. As a former employee, he was subject to an obligation of secrecy by the company that he worked for, which is a common idea, but Mr. Durst found it unimportant and violated this agreement he signed at the start of his career at Lush. Mr. Durst betrays his own old friends. Ms. Doncourt provided for Mr. Durst and welcomed him to her family when he was in need, not because she was obligated to, but because she cared and she was a good person. He repaid him by violating this agreement. This is not all that Mr. Durst did, though. Carson also lied about an email supposedly sent to Mr. Doncourt about Drufo being harmful. However, Ms. Doncourt never saw this email. If she had seen this email, she would have read it most definitely, because it was not a common thing to hear about Drufo. Next, you heard from Dr. Casey Rogers, who supposedly conducted an experiment to test how harmful Drufo can be, but none of it was recorded or entered into any evidence in this case. Even if it was, it connected the idea of a higher risk of cancer with farmers more than it did with actual Drufo or even Lush fertilizer. This means it is inconclusive, that it is purely Lush's fertilizer that can be harmful and fails to rule out other fertilizers. Expert or not, she identified the most easy way to get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is to breathe in something harmful and absorb it through one's skin. These are both activities done by the plaintiff quite frequently due to the choice to not use facial and respiratory protection and skin protection. This is exactly the advice used in the warning of Lush Fertilizer's own fertilizer bag, which Ms. Weirs used so much of. Dakota Weirs pleaded her case of Lush lacking accountability and neglecting a warning on the bag of its fertilizer. The real truth behind this is that Lush has a warning, but not for cancer because there's no risk of cancer deriving from the fertilizer. The plaintiff's ignorance and neglect of harmful chemicals and their presence in the fertilizer she was using every day for multiple years is really what makes it apparent that Lush is not responsible. She stated, quote, "Any rational person would wear shorts in the heat," unquote, while she was working. I think most would disagree with this while using harmful chemicals. Once again, and for the last time, Lush's warnings were thrown to the wind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steed. All right. I'm looking, I think I've got for Helbig's screen. Looks like I might have frozen there for Mr. Ruiz. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I am frozen right now. So I've tried to fix it. Can you guys hear me though?
I can hear you.
Okay. So do I have enough time to reclose?
So this will be the issue. The rules under the 5.4 trial sequence as following. Part 7 of the trial sequence says prosecution, plaintiff, contestant, rebuttal argument if properly reserved, which is optional, and then if the presiding judge's discretion. And there wasn't a request to reserve that. And that is, I think, a very important point. And so because there was no request to reserve that, I'm going to deny any rebuttal on the closing at this time. So we're going to go through, and I appreciate that, Mr. Ruiz, and the request on that. So I'm going to deny the request for a reclose on that. So what I'm going to have to happen now then, Mr. Descent, Mr. Salas, and Mr. Hoggs are going to calculate all of your tallies. I don't know if you've already gotten those done, gentlemen. Mr. Hogg, you've already gotten yours completed? Great. Mr. Descent, have you gotten yours? No, I'll let you go ahead and keep going through that. That's fine. And Mr. Salas, have you gotten yours together yet? Great. So what I'll do is I'm just going through my quick evaluation overall. You folks did a fantastic job. I want to say that. And I always seem to say this every year is I wish half my attorneys were as good as you guys coming in front of me in your presentations that you're making. I think you did a fantastic job. Some very small things I would critique at all would be, and some of it's just because we're on video. Number one, probably don't chew gum when you're in court. That's probably my big first one. Some judges don't care. I know of a few judges in Denver that encourage it, it seems like, but for the most part, most judges, and I think most juries are not going to want to see somebody chewing gum when they're at the stand or even while they're at the tables. So I'd probably discourage eating or chewing gum. The other thing about video is really strange is that it doesn't allow for what I would call flair almost, that you don't want to be a person stuck at a lectern like I am just sitting here doing nothing. But when you're on the video and you're kind of doing some swaying stuff, you almost get like a motion sickness going on. So I just suggest that as you go through further in the program, maybe watch your body language, not so much as to being strong presence or not, but not like nervous movements that could be distracting for other people as you're going through the process. But everyone did a very strong job. Ms. Helbig, very factual as you're going through. Mr. Ruiz, thought you did a very good job. On the void error, I probably would have done an examination of Ms. Weirs before asking questions, because that to me would be, you want to make sure your question for the jury, does this person really know what they're talking about or not? And I probably would have hammered that before rather than doing that during your cross-examination. And then for Ms. Jones, very strong presence, very strong cross-examination skills, narrowing down questions, and then even with the doctor, yes or no, please. I thought that was a very great examination. Mr. Steed, I thought you had good objections, same thing. And I would say for St. Augustine generally, very good cross-examination, very good job of narrowing people on their answers and making sure the questions weren't asking for something that allowed for a no, anything other than a yes or no question. So I thought it was properly phased. You guys as a team did a very good job, very good objections, very strong facts as you went through and asked people questions. For the witnesses, very believable. Everyone was very strong. Some people had some really technical characters that they had to play, but it felt like everybody was very comfortable in all of their characters, and I thought they did a wonderful job. We're kind of limited on time, so I don't want to go too long into that, but I just want to say you all did an outstanding job, and I was very happy to preside over your trial today. Thank you. Mr. Hogg, do you have anything you would like to give? Presentation?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just briefly, again, you guys do a great job. I always am impressed by how well done this is. One other thing I would just mention is, there's a tendency when you're going down, and I know you have your questions listed out, but listen to what the witness is saying, because sometimes there were situations where a witness would answer and then you would ask a question that just elicited the answer that they just gave. So try to make sure you're listening and just pay attention to the conversation almost more than just trying to check off questions. Other than that, great job. You guys always do awesome.
All right, Mr. Salas. It's not unmuting. There we go.
Need to find my mute button. Sorry. I agree with Frank and Judge Gonzalez. I thought you guys were wonderful. You did a great job. Very clear, very concise. The things that I like just generally, and I thought especially defense did real well, is in your opening arguments, making markers, where we're going to go, what's happening next, what
You muted out on us, Frank, or Ron.
So that part, you very good road marks, coming in and then bringing it home in the closing arguments. I thought you tied back well to that, so I like that. The other thing I liked, or I just say generally, and what I found was more is, as Frank alluded to, is the cadence, just in listening to the answer. So I find that very powerful myself. Is you answer the question, you ask the question, they answer the question, you let your jury and your judge hear the answer before you jump to the next. So sometimes you just want to go a little slower. How is this going? Or tell me about this. And then you ask the question, get that answer. And some of you guys did excellent at it. Some of you guys are a little faster. So again, that's cadence. And I think you get nervous and you go a little further than you need to. But overall, excellent. I thought the questions, as Judge indicated, were very well thought out, written. They had a very nice flow to them that elicited the answers that you needed to get. So I thought that was great. So great job for everyone. Again, I'm gonna echo those guys. I've been doing this for years, and it's always a pleasure to hear you guys, and hopefully you continue doing it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ron. Mr. Dissent?
Thank you, Judge. So just once again, I believe that I think Judge and the two other scorers have done an excellent job of kind of pointing out just how accomplished it is and how difficult it is, especially like via WebEx to do a trial. I can't imagine. And obviously they're far more senior than I, and I think their comments are probably more valuable for that. But just one thing that I would note is that, especially when you're on a camera and it's just you on the screen, it's really easy for us to notice when you're not planted. And I think Judge spoke about that. But I just noticed a lot of going back and forth and stuff like that. And that was super distracting for me. One other thing I saw was a lot of reading. And I think that Mr. Salas and Mr. Haig both kind of talked about that. You need to slow down the speed at which you're speaking, because when you read, you tend to go a lot faster. And as you go more quickly, I start to have to like almost get stressed out a little bit. And so just one thing I'd recommend is, you guys know this. I know for sure that all of you are like super comfortable with these facts. So just trust yourself with the facts and have that confidence in the facts instead of feeling like you need to read and go through things. You know what you're trying to get out. So just kind of let yourself have faith in yourself and be confident in yourself on that front. Overall, though, super impressive. I thought you guys were really thoughtful. And I also am so confident that you are so far ahead of where I would have been in high school. So well done.
Thank you, Brandon. And I'll say that I think to that point, though, it's like a really good coach versus a great coach in basketball. They watch the clock, and you got to know how much time you have left and be able to do that. So I do think that that comment about reading too fast is a good comment. You should be aware of what time you're at, what time you have agreed upon with your other teammates, be able to use that time. But of course, 5 minutes for closing, boy, I wish I could keep my attorneys down to 5 minutes on my closings. That would be, if I asked for 5 minutes on closing, there would be people throwing staplers at me in my courtroom. So that is fairly unrealistic as well. So all of those things together. I just want to make sure then for either Team Wheatgrass or St. Augustine, are there any inside bar disputes that we need to take care of at this moment?
None, Your Honor.
None for St.
None.
Augustine? Ms. Helbig, none
None
for you
for-
as well?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so I think that concludes everything for us. I think we can all just log off and then we'll go and turn that off from live streaming. Is there anything else that you need for us here in the courtroom?
There's nothing else that we need. I just want to let everyone know that while we are scheduled for the next round to start at 4 p.m., we have had some technical delays in a couple of the other courtrooms. We will get the pairings up onto the website as soon as possible, but just realize that if for some reason you notice there's a delay, that's the issue, but we will get them up as soon as possible.
All right, and then we go into, if we're going into the 4 o'clock, we'll still have the training at 3:30 then?
Correct.
Fantastic. All right. Hey, to the teams, congratulations, great job, and good luck in the ongoing contest that you have going forward. You guys did a fantastic job. Thank you so